welcome to another episode of Off the Print. Today evening, I am joined by renowned business cycle economist Dr. Kenneth De Silva and senior political journalist of the Daily Mirror, Callum Bandara. Today's episode is going to be extremely interesting because as we speak today, the cost of living is soaring outside, people are suffering and people are complaining, and people are alleging that the government has taken poor decisions which has led to the soaring cost of living. Dr. Kenneth, thank you so much for joining me. Callum, thank you so much for joining me as well. Doctor, what's happening? People are suffering, cost of living has gone up. You know, basic facilities, basic amenities are very difficult to get now. What's going on?
Yeah, thank you, Shamila, for asking me over for this program. I'm quite happy to be here, and it's my first visit to your place, so thank you for that. So the cost of living issue is two-pronged. Firstly, we have just come out from a pandemic, and that pandemic has resulted in global supply chains being disrupted. So we have seen not only in Sri Lanka but in rest of the world, food prices and commodity prices have increased. Okay. That is purely because supply disruptions. So the world is facing large quantities of supply disruptions. Okay. And on top of that, as a result of that lack of demand, freight companies pulled out their shipping lines, cargo lines in certain routes. Okay. So global freight prices have actually increased 500%. Okay. So both these two dilemmas are now hitting the global economy. Mm-hmm. And Sri Lanka is in a very vulnerable place. Mm-hmm. Because Sri Lanka over the years has neglected food production. Okay. We have a staples, which is rice, yes, which we have in some periods a surplus. Last year it was a fairly bumper harvest, but that's about it. Okay. Rest of it all we have to import. So our import bill is a chronic state. Okay. We consume more than we export. Okay. So our trade deficit is twofold of our revenue. So if we export one, we consume $2. Mm-hmm. So our trade deficit is also hitting us very hard. So no one has really put energy and effort into changing the direction of this imbalance, particularly consumer food items. So if you look at the basket of commodities that we import, from dairy milk to fish to yes, wheat to cement, and these are not consumables, but they are intermediary goods. But if you ask me the cost of living, so if you look at all these food items we import, including tin fish, mm-hmm, fish we import $300 million worth of fish we import annually, despite the fact that we are surrounded by exactly 543,000 square kilometers of ocean resources. Yes. It's unbelievable. Yes. This country's gone berserk. Yes. Right? We have a fisheries industry which is defunct. Mm-hmm. So there is some salvaging being done now. The minister is frantically trying to do it. Okay. But given the cycle that we are in, these things takes long gestation periods to transform. We have 200 cold rooms, 195 are broken. Oh, okay. So there is nowhere to store fish. That is deliberately done because we have adopted a import-driven economic model. We want Sri Lanka to become a trading country. Mm-hmm. So we import and we add value and we sell, but that has not happened. So we liberalized our economy from 1977, and chronic current account deficit, chronic fiscal deficit, and we continue to borrow and eat. So no sooner COVID hit, the realization dawned on us. Mm-hmm. Everyone started panicking. Everyone started pointing fingers to the government because you're the incumbent government, you have to address this, no choice. Exactly, right? Yes. But you have 5 major forces working against you. 5 major forces. What are the 5? Firstly, you've got a global commodity surge, mm-hmm, which you have never seen, including crude oil. As I just told you, all commodity prices up. Mm-hmm. Everything. Mm-hmm. You ask any manufacturer. I was in Dubai for the expo and I just came back. I went for the World Food Festival. Okay. Everyone is complaining. All producers across the world, same story. So you got that. And I said second thing was the freight cost. So that's there. Thirdly, you have got mobility issues. That is, countries are closed still. Even Australia, still there is a shutdown.
Yes.
In terms, if you go into Australia, you have got a mandatory quarantine of 14 days. You can't cross even a border.
Right.
And it's quarantine not at a home, but at a hotel.
Okay.
So you can't budge.
Okay.
So that mobility restrictions are there. Then we have a health issue. Everyone is finicky. If someone sneezes, you panic. If someone touches something, you're worried. So you got this health concern, and that's global. And therefore, the mobility is again restricted, and therefore tourism mobility and tourism and travel has come to a standstill. Fifthly, Sri Lanka has a huge external debt issue, inherited as a result of our consumption patterns. So each government that comes in, what they do is to appease the population, somehow tries to put things together. You've got a 5-year term, you have to make things work. You can't let things drift too far because you get kicked out otherwise in a democratic society.
Yes.
So you have to somehow patch it up. So there is a quick patch up done. You either go to the IMF, you beg with them, plead with them, it's okay, give me whatever you have, we'll make it work, we will sell some assets, we'll try and get some money in, or we go to the bond market and we borrow. We borrowed $12.5 billion from 2015 to 2019 in the capital markets, mind you, at exorbitant rates. That's all right. People are happy. They are not too worried about the debt service until you hit on your fiscal side. So we borrowed, we patched things together, forgot the production side, and we move on. So that's where we are with this. So cost of living is a function of what's happened globally, plus our inherent structural weakness in our food supply chain. So till we address that, we can't come out, and I think that's one thing that's being done now, but it's going to be a fairly painful process.
Doctor, I think that's the most simplified and the best version I have heard, because every day we face issues where people come up to us. We as journalists also are being questioned, that question the government about the cost of living. So I think your explanation is spot on, perfect. Thank you very much, but we're just going to go in for a short break.
Sure.
We're just going to go in for a short break. We will be right back. Welcome back to Off the Print. Today with me in discussion is popular financial economist Dr. Kenneth D'Silva and senior political journalist Callum Bandara. Just before we went in for a break, Dr. D'Silva was explaining to us as to what the reasons for Sri Lanka's soaring cost of living is. Callum,
yes,
you can take over.
Actually, Doctor, when you talked about the soaring cost of living, you mentioned global factors which are beyond our control, and also you talked about our country being a kind of an import-driven economy. But if you look at the policy of the new government that came into being in 2019, towards the latter part of 2019, they introduced a new economic system that is to boost local manufacturing, to substitute imports.
Sure.
You have implemented that policy for the past 2 years, but still the prices are high.
Sure.
Does it mean that the policy of the new government, has it failed?
Very important question, Callum. I think how I would answer it is probably in two parts. The first part is the departure from traditional economics was the first part of the overall policy framework. Now, why I say departure, we have been, as I told you in my previous answer, we have been primarily driven by looking at this comparative advantage doctrine, which we are taught in all textbooks, and all undergraduate students go through this, even the marketing students. So in that doctrine, you look at whatever you can produce well, you produce, and whatever you can't, you import and you trade, right? So this doctrine. So that based on that, we have opened our markets without any checks and balances, no controls, and by that we have managed to destroy most of our own domestic production companies. I'll give you two examples. One example is the dairy industry. We consume about $400 million worth of dairy products in Sri Lanka, predominantly milk powder. Now, if you go to any village without milk powder, they will die. But we have dairy milk, fresh milk. Now, in many parts of Europe and rest of the world, you don't have dairy milk powder. You have fresh milk because those industries are developed. Our annual consumption of milk is 1.3 trillion liters. We produce currently only 560 million liters. So now you can see the shortfall. So when dairy prices increase globally, import companies come to the government because it's price controlled and knock on the door and say, look chum, please increase the prices. So they give you a whole barrage of excuses, while some of them are acceptable, some of them are not. I'll tell you why. What is not is, these companies are global companies. They have inventory built in their countries of origin. Those inventories are valued at the current market price. So it's a transfer pricing mechanism that happens. So we import from their head office. They have a markup, they send it to us, and then we price it based on the exchange rate, and we supply to the local market. So when global prices go up, the inventory management is not done well, because they know global prices are going up. They can see it. They are in the business of managing global dairy milk. There is a global dairy index. We monitor that. I monitor that. If I monitor it, they monitor it. If I know global prices are going to shoot, they know global prices are going to shoot. So that mismanagement of the company's financial books are unpardonable. That mismanagement also is passed on to the Sri Lankan consumer, because the Sri Lanka Consumer Authority doesn't go back in time and look at their P&L. If you look at the 12 months, because global food prices collapsed after COVID in 2020,
yes,
it collapsed. At that point, you know, if you have got a fixed price, you know that you have to go and manage your price risk for the next 5 years, because you've got a fixed price. At that point, your gross profit margins are fairly high. When global prices went down, they didn't pass the benefit on to the consumer. Did you get a reduction in your milk
Now, doctor,
price?
if I interrupt you for a second, now dairy production, no local milk production, that cannot be done overnight. But I will draw your attention to food production. So the government, I mean, upon it assumed duties in 2019, it restricted or it banned imports of certain food items. For example, green gram, black gram, turmeric. But that is to boost local cultivations.
Sure.
But 2 years have lapsed. Prices of these items are skyrocketing.
When the government took over, when you look at the balance sheet, national balance sheet, you know it's unsustainable. We can't manage this because the debt is so high. There is a big hole, and when you saw the overall cash flows of the national balance sheet, and you looked at no tourism revenue from 2019, which was 1.6 billion, dropped to in 2020 it dropped to 683 million.
Okay.
In 2021, it's 100 million. So you got a $4.5 billion hole to cover. So you have to pull in the reins. So before COVID hit, the balance sheet was anyway in precarious state, the national balance sheet. So we knew that it's not sustainable to go on this path. We have to change. So we went into production, and the production economy takes time.
yes,
You can't get cows producing milk overnight. You can't
Exactly.
increase the litre range. It's impossible. So there is a whole value chain that you have to create. The silage has to be created, the grass has to be produced, the cows have to be fed, the cows have to be the breeding has to take place.
Yes.
Only then, so that takes significant time and energy and effort and coordination.
okay,
All these are dysfunctional, remember, because it's not in proper order, because it's deliberately dismantled. The second point is what I told you on fisheries. We need 275,000 tins daily of tin fish. We produce only 60,000, but we're surrounded by the ocean. Why we bring in frozen fish, we buy the tins and we sell it to our consumers.
it's really surprising because like you said, we are an island.
Absolutely.
Why aren't we using
So
our
this is the policy
resources?
shift, Shamila. This is the policy shift. This is the pain point.
Yes,
People are not ready to take that pain up, and that's why you get this noise, and that's why you get governments who become unpopular. And that's precisely why governments want to be popular by quick fixing these things.
yes,
So the populist measure is you go to the international markets,
Okay.
borrow the dollars, whatever the cost, we can borrow dollars, there is no problem. It's a cost that you have to pay. Whether it's 14%, if the government thinks 14% is a decent cost to feed the
Yes.
people, you can do it. Enough of lenders in the capital markets to lend you at 14%, no problem.
Now, doctor, as an economist, and according to your own observations, how long will it take for Sri Lanka to be self-sufficient in some of these items at least?
I mean, it's a process, Callum. As I said, production is not an easy journey. People talk about production and productivity without knowing the deeper meaning of this. And I keep telling our staff and our students to dig deeper into these words.
Yes.
Production is not easy. Now we looked at turmeric. You mentioned that. Turmeric crop cycle is 9 months. We import 8 million worth of turmeric annually, right? This year we are self-sufficient in turmeric.
But the irony is here that the prices are very
Yeah,
high. But
so
if
prices.
Yes.
Prices to produce a cost of produce a kilo of raw turmeric is about 100 rupees, give or take. To convert raw turmeric into powdered turmeric, you need a 1:7 ratio. Right, that is 7 kilos of raw turmeric will give you 1 kilo of powdered turmeric.
Okay.
So roughly about, let's say 800 rupees a kilo of powdered turmeric. Now it's a one crop cycle. To keep the farmer engaged and profitable, he needs at least 2.5 times profitability. So you multiply that, at least you need 2,000 rupees, 2,500 rupees to keep the farmer engaged, because it's only one crop cycle.
Okay.
Or you have to go into a multi-cropping type of production system. So that's where the consumer and the farmers have this issue. But as time goes on,
Okay.
that eventually will decline and productivity will increase, because profitability increase. When profitability increases, mechanization takes place.
Okay.
When mechanization takes place, cost of goods come down. That's what we're seeing in global inflation. Global inflation, however much money has been printed, has not risen. Yes, now because of the supply side, but not because of printing of money.
Right.
It's primarily because productivity has increased and costs have come down. So globally, inflation from about 2006, if you look at the trajectory of global inflation, has come down, with the exception of 2020, 2021,
Right.
because of the pandemic.
Right. Doctor, thank you so much. We are just going to go in for a short break. We will be right back. Welcome back to Off the Print. Dr. Kenneth, just before we went in for a break, you were explaining to us about the cost of living and the productivity. But now I'll ask you something. Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa just presented the budget proposals for 2022. What can we expect in that? I mean, what's attractive for the common man in that?
I think there is a fundamental departure from the budgets of the past. Why I say that is, the government in the manifesto itself, or the president in his manifesto in itself, pledged to this country that he will keep a fixed fiscal policy.
Okay.
He will keep stable monetary policy, and he will achieve a GDP growth of about 6%.
Okay.
Now, the first point of the fiscal policy, 2 budgets have gone, and fiscal policy has remained untouched.
Okay.
So that's a good thing. Why that is so important, Shamila, is this: businesses need certainty. Production economy needs certainty. You asked me that question previously. Businesses will not engage if they don't have certainty of taxes.
Yes.
There were times that budget after budget, fiscal policy used to change. Consumers get impacted, businesses get impacted, and as a result of that, here is the danger: no capital formation takes place. Without capital formation, you can't get a high GDP, and that's what we saw. GDP from 2015 declined from 5 to 2.3.
Okay.
Classic example.
Okay.
It's not the government's fault,
Okay.
but that's because it was driven by an external party. It was the IMF.
Okay.
The IMF comes in and targets fiscal policy, and then precisely know that if you do that, that's the bedrock where business gets hammered the most. Then we are back to our original stance of forgetting production, import driven economy.
If you look at the, now you mentioned about this IMF actually. So, IMF has always been advocating public sector reforms, but in this particular budget itself, Minister Basil Rajapaksa, who presented the budget, in his speech, he said there will be some reforms in the public sector, public service sector. Does it mean that you follow some of the IMF proposals even without the knowledge of the IMF?
No, I mean that is understood, because when you look at our expenditure pattern, I mean, as I said, first thing is, once the economy starts to tank, you have to revive it. It's in cardiac arrest. You need to give it a shock treatment, and the shock treatment came by government revenue being passed on to the corporate sector. Tax reliefs were given. Tax reliefs were given so that tax 600 billion or 700 billion of revenue was given to the corporate sector so that they could increase their capital base. Once you increase the capital base, you find the economy turning back, because we have come after a downturn in the business cycle, which is a Sri Lankan business cycle, but the global business cycle was just picking up. So when we look at the global business cycle, we knew that the only way to pull this economy out was not more austerity, but more stimulus.
Okay.
And the stimulus had to be by way of a tax incentive. So then if you give out your revenue, you need to cut your expenditure. So and unfortunately, COVID also happened, but that's a separate story. Despite all that, your fiscal deficit reached about 11% of GDP. Now that is not too bad after managing a pandemic.
Okay.
After putting your health balance sheet first as opposed to your economic balance sheet.
Okay.
We spent $600 million purely on the health bill. And these are all grants given by various donor agencies. Now that had to be done. So while you do that, you have to reform the expenses, and I think that's a good development. The development has to happen because some of these, we have about 400 state enterprises. Some of these are duplicated. Some of these are highly inefficient. So the budget focused on saying, look, you have to develop your own business model. Don't come to the government. Look at your own business model, look at your own revenue models. Based on those business plans, based on those revenue models, you go out to the market, either work with the public-private sector, so public-private partnership, or go to the capital markets and raise your funding to fund your capex. Don't come to the government. That was the message. So the state-owned enterprises have got that now, and the chairman and the board have to do it. So which is a good development.
Doctor, my final question, and then we're going to wrap up. Do the youth have hope for the future here?
I would think so, Shamila. I want to be very optimistic. Because why I tell you this is with some depth. If you don't have production, none of these youth have any hope. Because only if you produce a thing, or if you produce something in the industrial sector, then food scientists, technology, new developments, innovation, new distribution channels, logistics, all this happens only through production. Our kids go to universities overseas, they study food sciences, they study genomics, they study all these other big data, etc. But where do you do if you are a trading country? You just import, put 10% and sell. So our marketing guys have a field day. They don't need to think of anything because it's already out there. They just get the suppliers, marketing pitch, and they roll it out here, and we are convinced. So production has to happen. With production, knowledge will be retained. With knowledge, children have a better future, and also the future is becoming bigger because we have a backyard, another large entity which is the port city, which will absorb about 100 billion worth of goods and services from Sri Lanka. Now we are not ready for that. That is the sad part. Our producers are not ready for it.
Dr. Kenneth, I absolutely loved your simplified versions of the economy at the moment. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, Callum. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time as well. We will be back again next week with a brand new episode of Off the Print. Good night.